I do want to ask you about the segment that we see, because the next episode we get a recap of what's happened, and then we see a video feature. It's all about you, and they're talking about the January 4th preview because that's the big show. And we're talking about a personal issue that put the company in jeopardy, but no one's really saying what that is. And as you're coming into the building, everyone's acting shocked. You and Mick Foley are shouting at each other. And then you meet with Dixie in her office. And here's the write up from Brian Alvarez. He asked to come back to Impact, the company he founded. She said before they talked about his future, they needed to be crystal clear about his past. She said he put the company in a terrible position and lied to her. He said when they got on that plane years ago to make a bunch of promises to Kurt, Jeff ending up where he is wasn't one of them. She said she gave him what she thought was his best option, sit on the sidelines and hope time healed those wounds. He said he was sorry if he disrespected her and sorry for everything. She said at this point, it's not about her. She said, you've got to go face Kurt and take responsibility for your actions. And you said, well, okay, thanks. And now it's time for you to meet with Kurt. And Brian writes, it feels like it's the Old West. I heard you were coming, Kurt said. Jarrett said, listen, man to man, if I disrespected you or offended you in any form, shape, or fashion, I'm sorry. Kurt, did you hear me? I'm sorry. And Kurt said, he'd heard what he said. I have a match, he said, and walked out. So what do you think of this reintroduction of you? You're back in the Impact Zone. People are shocked to see you, shouting with Foley, confrontation about the future and the past with Karen. She sends you to Kurt. With the benefit of hindsight, would you have changed anything in that?
We're going to go into our, and man, the saying creative is subjective could not be any more appropriate on this, because you could have taken a couple of different avenues with this story. But as Dutch Mantell would often say, we were going to end up at the same spot. So trying to make peace at work and all factors involved, including 5 kids, you take the path at least resistance. And no, business is business. I can kind of jump on a sword and move it and change a few different things. But at the end of the day, we knew that we were going to go Jeff Kurt in a single. And so let's just kind of get there. Again, we could nitpick it to death. Again, I'm going to go back to the opening shot. Dixie becoming a power authority, a talking head. To this day, I was never comfortable with it, because it to me, it never resonated. It never broke through. And it's not easy. I mean, it is absolutely not easy. But an authority figure in professional wrestling has to have chops, despise him, hate him, whatever it may be. I think that's one of the reasons Vince McMahon was so successful, is because as a character, he was such a strong presence. Bischoff, when he's, just playing that authority figure, and there's a few others through the years. Dixie is a sweet Ole Miss Southern belle, if you will, and that never jived. And so if we're going to nitpick kind of the story, her as an authority figure just never, to me, really got off the ground. And this was her first foray into it.
What's interesting is you might be thinking to yourself, especially if you weren't watching back then, or maybe it's just been a while since you've seen, because we're talking about something that's like 15 years old,
which is crazy.
But this doesn't result in a match. Like, in fact, you wind up teaming with Kurt. I think all conventional wisdom would say we're going to go straight to a pay-per-view main event series, maybe have 3 or 4 matches, and eventually we get there.
Dixie was afraid of it.
That's a year from now. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Why doesn't it happen now?
Dixie despised Karen. That's simple.
Wait, is that real?
For real. Vince Russo, when he called me the first night, bro, the money is Jeff Kurt and Karen. I can't do the accent. Okay, where are we going to go with this? Well, bro, we got to get you back in here first. And I'm paraphrasing, but because you got to remember, in this big pot of stew was Hulk and Eric, who could have cared less about the history of TNA. I mean, not just the six-sided ring. They weren't a fan of AJ Styles. They weren't a fan of any of the front line. They wanted to bring in their entire new crew. They wanted to make Dixie happy and put a hairnet on me and just let's banish anything that's happened. We're talking 2010. So anything prior to happening to 2010 and Hulk and Eric arriving, let's act like it didn't happen. And so those were the balls in the air that Russo and others in creative were juggling.
So you come out to the Impact Zone, you cut a promo, you're talking about how good it feels to be back at home in the Impact Zone. And this is the company that you founded 7 years ago. And after 15 years of being in the wrestling business, you decided to take your hard-earned money and found an organization called TNA. We see Dixie watching on as you're saying all this.
Hey, Conrad, you know who that is to her left?
Who is that?
Her father, Bob Carter. You know who that is to her right?
Who's that?
Kevin K of Spike TV.
How about that?
Yeah.
All sitting there watching on. How about that?
Yeah, and they got to hear this reaction. So let that sink in.
So you're in the ring, cutting a promo. Fans are excited to hear from you. They're excited that you're back. And then all of a sudden, Hogan appears on the big screen. And he does a heel promo saying, nobody cares. We're all sick of hearing.
What? He does a heel promo?
Well, he's saying nobody cares. We're tired of hearing you talk.
In his mind, this was the big babyface promo the Hulkster was going to cut.
Well, okay. He also says the truth is you started the company, but it's also true that you drove it into the ground, Jeff. And if it wasn't for Dixie resurrecting the company and giving all these young guys a shot, this place would be under. Of course, the fans start chanting bullshit. And Hulk Hogan says, minority stockholder doesn't mean shit to me. They've restructured all the deals, and he is Dixie's new partner. And as far as all your past accolades, he said, nobody cares. And at this point, I don't think anybody can tell, is this a heel promo or a babyface promo? But he tells you to get your boots, get in line, and prove yourself like the rest of the crew. Quote, lace them up and be ready, brother. And I hope you can be ready for the young guys. And of course, this makes you sad. You have a sad reaction in the ring.
Oh.
But like, dude, when you first read this on a format, they're going to have me do what now? And you know that Dixie, Billionaire Daddy, and the guy who runs Spike is going to be in the crowd, and they're hearing as you're pouring your heart out and the fans are with it, and they hear from Hulk Hogan and fans start chanting bullshit. What's going through your mind then? So when you first see the script and you see, okay, this is what you want me to do, and then actually doing it, knowing that didn't go the way they hoped, and they had a ringside seat for it.
I couldn't wait to look at Vince Russo and just, Vince, did I do okay? And ask him to respond to me. Conrad, and look, and I said it earlier, hindsight's 2020. But when I was given that, I'm like, you want me to go out in Orlando at the Impact Zone that we've been in since 2004. Hell, I could name half the people in the pit. They were our faithful that were in the good times and the bad times and all of that. And I'll call it the amount of heat that the main event mafia had, and the AJ Styles and Samoa Joe and Eric Young and the front line, and where I had left off out of the story in June or July or August, whenever that was. So this was, I think, this is my first return to the Impact Zone. And you're going to have Hulk say this for real? Okay. Sounds good to me. Let's roll. I'm just a wrestler.